Welcome to another episode of Why Pals Tales from the Superyacht Laundry. I am your host, Sharice Reedman, and I am with the gorgeous Emma Mannering. We are going to hear Emma's story, her tales for onboard. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me.
It's nice to be here.
Thank you for suggesting this lovely location as well. Townhouse in Alresford. Absolutely stunning location, and great pastries this morning. So yeah.
Oh, coffee's good. I haven't had a pastry yet.
We'll go down and sample later. But thank you for joining me. Now, obviously, I've wanted you to be a guest because I know your story. But the story of me and you goes back way, way back.
It does.
Because I was the one that gave you your first job.
Yeah, you gave me my first full-time stewardess position. Yeah.
Yep. I remember you taking it very seriously.
I have no comment to say about that. Yes.
Right, so for our listeners, how did you find the yachting industry?
How did I find it in general, or how did I find my way into it?
How did you find your way into it?
Okay, so I met a guy in a bar when I was 19 in Southampton, which is where I grew up. And that guy is now my husband. And he was in yachting and I was not, and I was at uni. And yeah, we ended up together, and I was in a damp, cold uni house and questioning my life choices. Why was I doing this? I studied music, like classical music, and I knew I didn't want to go kind of into professional performing, and so I was looking at kind of like an admin role, PR, marketing, something to do with the classical industry. And I had a job it was like a ground floor basement in London.
Nice.
Again, it was dark, cold, there were no windows, like no natural light, barely enough money to pay my uni rent, let alone like not a crappy student house rent. And Guy, my boyfriend at the time, was sending me pictures of him on the beach in the Caribbean, and was like, duh, come join yachting.
Did he actually use a line, I work on a super yacht? Can you actually remember the first conversation?
I can. It wasn't that. Thank goodness. Yes.
Come see my yacht.
No, I wasn't that naive. No, it wasn't that, but it probably wasn't much better. And yeah, that was it for 3 years. I was like, no, I'm not joining yachting. That's your thing. I'm doing my thing. And then
you succumbed.
And then I succumbed, and I was like, yes, like, sod it, I want to be on a beach. Yeah, absolutely. So that was it. And in that time, I had been out, I had visited him. His boat at the time were amazing, really close with all of them still. We call them like boat family. And they let me come out, do day work. They were in yard in New Zealand, and I went out for like 3 weeks and just lived in their crew house in New Zealand with them all. So really like the best introduction into yachting that I could have had. And it gave me that chance to dip my toe into the water and to see whether it was something I wanted to do or not. So it didn't feel like a kind of a huge, scary unknown. You know, I didn't fly out to Antibes and start day working for the first time.
That makes sense why you were so confident when you came on board. You're like, I'm just here until I can get my boyfriend's boat.
Yeah, and I was, and I was honest about it.
You were honest about it. You were honest.
And they said that there would be a position for me soon, so I was like, this is just filling my summer.
They're just waiting to sack someone. So
yeah,
you'll be fine.
Yeah, and you were like, sure, we'll see.
We'll see.
You're going to be with me forever.
Thinking back, can you think of your first impressions? Like, obviously coming on board my boat, like what was that first impression before the reality sits in?
What was the first impression? I think I just remember you were mid boss trip or charter. It was a bit confusing because like we had boss on for quite a lot with other guests at the time, didn't we? And so you were mid trip and Alex was asleep in the cabin. We had a 3-berth cabin.
It was tight.
It was tight. It was really tight. Also, sometimes shared by a 4th member. Like it was tight, and I needed uniform, and you're like, oh, like she's asleep. She needs to get uniform. It was just a little bit chaotic, and I was like, okay, cool. Like, here we go. And that was it. We just hit the ground running.
Yeah, that boat was pretty chaotic in general.
It was, but it was fun and it was great. And I think we all didn't take ourselves too seriously.
No.
Which was nice.
So I have, it's not very many interviewees that I have a memory of, but I have a memory of catching you and Alex in the master cabin. This was off charter, dancing around some song, and I literally stood there for like 2 minutes. We're like, I think we were detailing ready for the next trip, and you two weren't doing anything.
So yes, that did happen, but I'm actually not going to throw Alex under the bus because it wasn't her, it was Ali. It was Ali.
Oh,
yeah,
that other little sprite.
Yeah, she was a bad influence.
Let's just blame it on her.
Yeah,
blame it on her.
Yeah.
So, obviously, you had a great time, met new friends on mine. What was it like joining your boat with your boyfriend?
Yeah, different in that I was really aware that I had been given this job because I was his girlfriend. And I knew some of the crew and I knew the captain. We'd been out, I think, for a few dinners at this point. And so, yeah, I was conscious that it wasn't the typical situation of I had applied for a job and I had got it. So I think I found myself probably less carefree and taking myself more seriously.
I suppose in a way you're probably paranoid that it's not on your own merit.
Yes, yeah. No, exactly. And so I think I felt like I had to prove myself, which is never really I don't think the best situation to be in, because I think it kind of clouds everything slightly. And I felt like there was kind of an agenda, or I couldn't just go into it with kind of an open mind.
No dancing in the master. Quite so.
I don't think there was. I don't think there was any dancing in the master. And I mean that was a shame. There is a time and a place for that.
There's plenty.
Sometimes, yeah.
So obviously in the beginning, was there anything you found hard, like transferring from like shore life to boat life, or did you just love it all?
I think boat politics.
I don't think anybody can prepare for boat politics.
No. And when you're in a couple, boat politics, I think, are really tricky. That dynamic is really tricky. What else did I find difficult? There were some things that I wouldn't say I'm naturally the tidiest person. And I actually remember you calling me up and being like, look, like, you're doing all of this really great, but like you just need to tidy up after yourself. Like I think I'd made like 20 cocktails and just left this aftermath of destruction in the galley that we shared with the chef, and you were just like, great cocktails, but this is not okay. And so
you're better now, though.
No, I'm not. I'm terrible now. The guy often is like, I don't understand how you were ever a stewardess. That's just not how I work. I don't clean as I go along.
Right.
Yeah. So that was a learning curve.
So before we go on to your journey out, where was the best place you went? Like your standout locations? Because this is the reason why we do the job.
Yeah. Do you know what? Everyone asks that, and my mind often goes blank. And I think it's when you've been to so many places, this is going to sound really ridiculous, but when you've been to so many places and often you don't know where you are because you just wake up and you're in a place.
That is true.
And I remember I said to, I can't remember which boat it was, but I said to the captain, like, can we put in the crew whiteboard, like where we are in the world in the day? Because I didn't know always where I was. And sometimes you don't know what country you're in, which sounds so ridiculous. I think for me, I was happiest in the Caribbean, in the Bahamas. I think I, in general, felt a lot more relaxed. And the majority of my time on board, I think I was more kind of US, Caribbean-based than Med-based. I unlike many other yachties, I actually haven't spent that much time in the south of France. So it's always something I wish I had done more of, and now I'd like to go back and do more of.
You will be able to under a new banner.
Yeah. The problem is you don't have that yachty budget anymore.
No, you don't have free accommodation, food,
free food,
and sometimes free drink, and No, but you can slum it.
Yeah.
Slum it in the south of France.
Yeah. What was yours? What was your favourite place?
My favourite place was the Greek islands.
Oh yeah.
When we worked on that boat, because it had quite a shallow draft, we could get right into like little bays and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And sunrise, it was all quiet before the chaos started. I remember some really nice moments. I remember doing anything that was in the middle of the sea. I kind of liked, away from land, those big voyages, plenty of stars in the sky. Specific places, not so much, but just the vibe of, that experience. What's it like to be on the water?
Yeah.
The whole point is to not be anywhere near land.
Yeah, it's peaceful. I used to love being early girl and like going outside, sitting on the swim platform with a coffee and just like taking in the morning.
Yeah, because when it's like busy, you just don't take a moment to do it at home. So you're working on board, living your best life with your partner. All is good. Can you remember when things started to change?
I think what I found challenging at first was working as a couple. When we took jobs, they kind of suited one of us better than the other. And so one of us had to compromise somewhere. And I was chief stew on a boat, and my partner was chief officer, and he was kind of wanting to step up. He had done his masters, and there wasn't an opportunity on board, and so he was kind of excited to, go and get his first drive and be a captain, and I was really happy in my role on board. And so that was the first time where it was like, how do we navigate this, where we both now kind of want different things, and for you to, go and get a first drive captain job somewhere, it's probably going to be on a smaller boat. Is that something that I want to do? Like, do I want to kind of go down in size to work with you, when actually I'm thinking, I'd quite like to step up in size, and that would be a kind of a nice next step for me. So that was the first time that I kind of got thinking, I guess, about the future and actually long term, how is this going to work? And then that brought in conversations of, okay, well, we were engaged, like I knew I wanted a family, so how is this going to work? How are we going to navigate that? And so there were all of these kind of like what ifs going on.
I never really thought of that. Like, as a couple, one does probably have to sacrifice. And considering that most men obviously end up higher ranking, it might be always the female side of the relationship that has to sacrifice in one way or another.
Yeah.
I never thought of that. Yeah. And also there's a big, obviously, like you said, step up, maybe go bigger. That's also a big change socially, because obviously if you're stepping down in size, that's a smaller crew, which means that politics could be more intense.
Yeah. Or I don't know. I haven't figured out whether I think the smaller the boat, the more politics, or the larger the boat, the more politics. I think they probably have different aspects. And challenges.
I think you could probably last longer. A smaller boat, if it goes wrong, it's all wrong.
Yes.
If it's right, then it's all right. I think because there is, obviously it's a smaller community of individuals. I think there's probably, I would say, if it goes wrong, it's going to all go wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
If on a bigger boat, you might be able to hide, but I never made it to, what is big now. I mean, they're enormous.
Yeah.
So it started to change,
starting to think about the future. We managed to get a captain, chief stew rotational position after we did a bit of time apart where he did get his first drive. And so we were on different boats. And that was, again, kind of difficult because we had just been used to living and working together, sharing a cabin together. I mean, there's literally no space to then suddenly distance and time apart on different boats again, which we had done at the start of our relationship. But it's not what I would call kind of your typical normal life that people experience back home. And so he got onto a new boat as a captain and I stayed, and then we eventually found a job together again. And it was rotational. On paper, it kind of ticked all the boxes as the dream job. And for whatever reason, it wasn't perfection. I don't think does exist. It's so dependent on crew, owners, itinerary, the boat, how you are just in yourselves at that time. And then COVID hit. And so suddenly we were in a yard in Florida, kind of on lockdown and quarantine, when actually Florida wasn't really in lockdown. And there was this huge fear coming from back home, all that uncertainty, we didn't know what was going on, that worry with loved ones. And we were, in the yard, kind of living in this alternate universe, it almost felt like.
Florida didn't lock down, did it?
I don't think they ever did properly in the end. It was really just kind of normal life carried on.
But you were locked down.
Yeah, and that was tricky because we kind of had to make our own rules in a way, and trying to figure out what was best for the crew and for everyone, and also the owner and crew back home who were stuck and quarantined and were meant to be coming back, and that couldn't happen. So immediately, as with everyone experienced during COVID, but your lives are kind of turned upside down, and we had to figure it out on a boat. And I think I took on a lot of that stress without even realising. And it put a lot of, I think, pressure and strain on not only our relationship, but the whole crew's relationship in general. We all had differing opinions on how things should be handled. Time on board suddenly felt really stressful, really isolated. And
well, you're a decision maker. As a chief stew, you're responsible for people, safety beneath you.
Yeah.
As in just a role kind of level. And if they don't agree, because to be honest, nobody really agreed on anything during that time. So to try and keep a tight ship, too important, it must have been a real challenge.
No, it was, absolutely. And I think it wasn't the yachting that I fell in love with. We weren't travelling, we weren't going anywhere. We were getting work done. We had contractors on board, and that brought with itself a whole load of stress. And we'd be, cleaning after them and for COVID. And it kind of, it just wasn't the job role that I had fallen in love with. And at this same time, I had injured my neck. And what I now recognise was, I think I was experiencing burnout, and I was just kind of shutting down, I think, with the levels of stress that I was experiencing. And I think it had been building for a long time.
Do you think the levels of stress, I'm not, would you, have you, at that point, have you done any managerial training of how to run a team or, obviously, because at this age, what age were you when you were chief stew?
That's a really good question. Like 24, maybe?
Yeah. So obviously, I'm not taking anything away from you doing the job, but the job, like you said, you weren't in love with the job anymore because the job had completely changed.
Yeah, no.
And I don't assume that your captain, or, you would have been pushed to do any kind of managerial crisis kind of training.
Yeah, no, I've done no training whatsoever. I actually, I became chief steward by accident in that I took a job as a second stewardess on a boat, and there was no chief stewardess at the time, and the captain, love him to bits, was like, okay, well, you've been on for 2 weeks, it's like, I like what you're doing, like, I think you should be chief stew. And the owner, and I'd met the owner, and the owner liked me, and it was a private boat, and so there was kind of a bit more flexibility, I think, in how things were done, and that was that. So I kind of skipped being second stew and suddenly was chief stew of a team of 5. And yeah, that was...
Looking back now, that sounds a bit bonkers.
It was
to you.
It was completely bonkers, and it was amazing for me. I mean, it gave me a great opportunity, and I took it and was like, yeah, let's go with this. And, I'm sure there were many mistakes made along the way, but that was how I learned, because I hadn't really had that step up of, overseeing my chief stew do stuff or kind of stepping in perhaps when they were on holiday. I hadn't had that more kind of typical route doing the courses. I was just thrown into it. And so, yeah, I don't regret doing that. And I'm really thankful for that opportunity. But I don't think you can probably ask the stewardesses that I worked with. I probably wasn't your typical chief stew.
I don't think it even comes out, like, I'm a firm believer that the job isn't rocket science. Like, if you are a very capable individual, you can learn the job. But where it gets tricky is the job, like you said, completely changed because of the scenario.
Yeah.
So you're not doing the job that you kind of were learning on the job.
Yeah.
You've now got to, as an individual, any manager in any company or whatever would have to lean on other skills to then do, what was a world crisis management.
Yeah.
And to be honest, most chief stews, even if they've been doing that job for years, wouldn't have probably the skills to help manage, because that's intense team management during a crisis, which is only, as far as I'm aware, undertaken by certain jobs. There's certain professions where they do that kind of intense training. So kind of thrown in at the deep end.
And, I'm the first to admit boundaries or kind of any form of, I was going to say discipline, as I'm thinking of my toddler. It's not my strong point. I am not very good at putting boundaries in place or kind of setting rules. And so that was a really uncomfortable thing for me. And like having to set rules to adults of you can't leave the boat or you can only leave the boat and, have you sprayed yourself down with antibac and worn a mask. I mean,
madness.
That's like my worst nightmare. I wasn't good at that, and it made me feel really uncomfortable. And
is it surprising that then there was burnout? Because you've got no skills to lean on.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? During that time, so it's no,
and it was not enjoyable. Yeah.
So is it possible to pinpoint a moment where you were like, I'm done. I'm done. Like, this is not working.
I ended up having to have some procedures done to my neck in the hospital in America. Nothing like too serious. They like burn the nerves off in my neck, and then kind of went back to
nothing too serious.
Well,
just burning.
It wasn't like open surgery. But it was.
I don't want to be a drama queen. But they just burned some nerves in my neck.
They burned my nerves up. And they kind of injected into my spine, I guess. Well, yeah. And I kind of
Just
went back to the boat, and I was in pain, and I was actually in a neck brace.
Lovely.
And I went back to the boat, and I was like, what am I doing? Like, why am I here? Like, I'm not well. I actually need to go home and be on medical leave. And so that was the first kind of sign. I wasn't able to do my job. I think that was really clear. And actually, had we had guests come on, there's no way I would have managed to have guests on board. And I think I only survived for as long as I did on board in that period was because it was COVID and we didn't have guests on board. So in some ways, you know, the fact we didn't have guests enabled me to stay longer, but the reality was I wasn't actually capable of performing my duties. And actually in an emergency situation, if we were at sea, I'm not sure how great I would have been. So that's when it kind of dawned on me. And I think I needed that kind of black and white, am I able to do this? Realistically, no, I need to go home. And went home, and I didn't get better immediately in terms of I didn't suddenly recover and could run a 5K again like I thought I would be able to. And that's when I realised this was going to take a lot longer, and I needed to look at it in a holistic way and really have an overhaul of my life, because I was carrying all this stress. You know, I was looking after everyone but myself. It was taking its toll on my body, and I needed really a proper life overhaul. And I started having therapy, and I really delved into kind of what do I want in life? Like, what do I want for my life? Where do I see myself in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? What is it I want? Like, this is my time now to figure this out. And I was meant to be going back to the boat in, 8 weeks or whatever. And I was like, I just can't do it. I can't do it. The thought of going back filled me with absolute dread.
Was that just because of the physical? How was the politics on board during this time?
Yeah, not amazing. Not amazing. And I'm mindful that everyone was experiencing, that uncertainty of COVID, and we were all navigating this world crisis. And so I think, everyone took some of that on and were probably not their best selves. But yeah, I didn't feel like, to be honest, I would have been that welcome back on board. But also knowing that I needed to perhaps, look after myself a bit more long term. And I didn't think that would have been acceptable on board, on any boat. And I think that's one of the downsides of the yachting industry, is that there isn't much wiggle room for if you are not 100%.
Yeah. I mean, if you are not 100%, and that also unfortunately makes the situation worse, because people that aren't 100% will keep going because they fear that they'll lose their job.
Yeah. And I've seen it time and time again where people have gone and said, I'm struggling, and they have lost their job.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't fill you with any confidence to be like, actually, I can ask for help and get help. That's what, like we're saying, ask for help, it's okay. But the reality is it's not okay.
It's not okay. But there are things that are changing, but we can cover that at the end.
Yeah.
So obviously you're having this massive period of reflection.
Yeah.
So I take it you haven't got an exit strategy whatsoever.
Well,
you're just kind of making it up as you go along.
Kind of. In that, I had, because I am a bit of a planner, a chaotic planner, but I do like to plan. I had always been like, what's next after yachting? I knew it wasn't going to be forever. And so I had kind of thought about what would I like to do. And I was very sensible in yachting. And it's like, in terms of...
What?
Yes. I was very sensible in terms of my finances, in terms of planning for the future. I had bought a flat, and that was like one of my main goals. So I knew I had somewhere to go back to should I had a home, I had savings, and so I had flexibility. It gave me the freedom to leave without that pressure, and it gave me the freedom and the flexibility to then take some time. But you name it, I thought about doing it. I was thinking, I wanted to stay in hospitality, but again, it was like, okay, well, if my neck is bad, how is that going to happen? So I then thought, okay, what can I do that isn't active or isn't unsociable hours? And I was saying to you earlier, I am now really strict with my working hours. If someone asks me to do a Zoom at 9 p.m, I say no, because that's really important to me and my health, and that is one of the boundaries that I have put in place. And I've lost my train of thought.
Well, we were just, it's no wonder you lose your train of thought, because I think each crew member on board, obviously we're talking about females, I went through the whole process myself, Googling about a million different things, different ideas, again, the same as you. I didn't want to work in hospitality. I could have physically done it, but I didn't want to, because of the hours, because most of us, when we step off, are thinking about a family.
Yeah.
And hospitality hours and a family do not mix.
No.
So what are you going to do?
Yeah. And I was like, okay, I loved planning my wedding. I absolutely loved it. I was like, I'm going to be a wedding planner. And I had a little notebook, and I was like thinking of names I could call my wedding planning business. And then I thought, okay, well, what about that? That involved quite a lot of travel still, I thought. So then I thought, okay, maybe interior design. And
I like nice things.
All of these things were like pretty and aesthetic. And my husband's aunt is actually a fabulous interior designer, and I was like, oh, maybe she'll train me and I can go into that. But she was in a different part of the UK, and I'd never asked her any of this, by the way. I should have probably said no. But I had all these ideas. What could I do? Mm-hmm. But it was only through having therapy and kind of having this crisis of what am I going to do with my life, that I realised, for me, it's always been about the people. And what I loved about yachting was the people, it was the guests, it was the owners, it was those relationships. And that's where I'm most comfortable, like with people. It's not kind of the admin side, it's not, making sure everything looks beautiful all the time.
Making sure everything's tidy.
Just, no. I'm comfortable when I'm just myself and talking or listening, but having those connections. That's what I enjoy the most. And so then I kind of was like, well, what can I do with that? And after a few months of, well, probably nearly a year, I reckon, since starting therapy, I was like, I think I might want to be a therapist. And I remember being so nervous to tell my therapist. I was afraid she was going to laugh and be like, no way. And no, she sort of was like, yeah. And I was like, I'm not the first one to have started therapy and then to say, I think I want to be a therapist. But yeah, and that was that. And so that was when the penny kind of dropped and everything settled. You
felt, I do think there is a moment when you're like, well, maybe that's the thing after trying loads. But I have to say, for me personally, the ego takes a bit of a battering when you're so lost and you're like, I could do this, I could do that, you could do anything.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of ladies get also overwhelmed and go back.
Yes. And I think it's definitely a problem, almost having too much choice. And I remember before I bought my little flat at the time, it was like, where do we want to live? Been to all these places in the world. Technically, I've got no dependents. I've got no, I haven't got a job anywhere. Where do I want to live? Like, where do I want to set myself up? And that in itself was overwhelming. And kind of by default, was like, well, friends and family are here in the UK. Like, let's not overcomplicate things. That's what I miss. Let's go home. But yeah, almost too much choice is difficult.
So
that loss of identity, I think, or lack of purpose was probably one of the hardest things for me, actually.
Well, because you go from top of your game to not knowing your game at all.
Yeah, not even top of your game that you don't know game.
You can't even get good because you don't know what you want to do.
Yeah.
So, that's obviously we've spoken about that quite a lot.
Yeah.
So you decided to be a therapist.
Yeah.
Which means you went back to education.
Yes.
How was that?
Well, I said to my family, both my parents are in academia, and I said to them during my undergrad when I was writing my dissertation that I had left very last minute, I said there's no amount of money in the world that anyone could pay me to go back to school. So kind of tail between my legs, I had to say, so I'm thinking of being a therapist and I'm going to do a master's. And yeah, I still feel uneasy about that in some ways.
Really?
Yeah, I think it's
a massive decision.
It's a massive decision.
It's also very costly, I imagine.
Costly.
But I have an almighty respect, a bit like yourself. I'm always about people. Like, it would be a dream to go back and study psychology.
Yeah,
that is a dream, and I've got so much respect for you going back to do it.
Yeah, well, thank you. I think it was easier in terms of psychotherapy because most people come to it as a second career, and so it wasn't like I was going back to do an undergrad and sat in a room with 18-year-olds, which, I mean, great, nothing wrong with that, but I think that would have been difficult, or a little bit more difficult, whereas I went back and I sat in a room and I actually ended up being one of the youngest again, which I wasn't expecting.
I think that's because of the profession.
Yes.
You do need a bit of life experience before you can start telling people to get their life in order.
I don't tell them to get their life in order.
Guide.
I wait for them to
realise it.
But you do need some life experience, I think, and everything that you experience in life, I believe, just makes you a better therapist, a better practitioner, because you're able to understand more. And actually, I wouldn't want to go see a therapist who
hasn't done anything.
Hasn't done anything, or has had the perfect life and hasn't experienced any loss or traumas or difficult times, because to me that's not relatable.
No.
And also, I mean, I don't know anyone that actually has never experienced anything before. I mean,
no.
Life and that's being human.
No.
So it's probably quite hard to find someone.
But it makes logical sense, obviously I've got a number of friends that have got degrees in psychology, but then they leave it.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the reasons, I'd love to know the science behind it, but one of the reasons is because you do have to go and get life experience. So how can you relate to a person going, like you said, through these things if you have no bearing on what that actually is?
Yeah. And sometimes, I mean, you don't need to experience the same thing to have empathy and understanding, but you need to have space for that and to have some concept of the emotion that they're feeling. I see people that I haven't had the same experiences as, and even if someone showed me their, CV, life CV, and it had all of the same things as me, they could be feeling completely different to how I felt, because we all feel things differently and on a completely individual level. So although I might know, I don't really know. And so it's kind of in that unknowing where that empathy is really important.
So it is incredible. I mean, we will do another episode and actually start going into it. So I'm going to... You worked on my boat, and then we hadn't spoken for a while. And obviously when I was starting Pearls of Wisdom, when I spoke to you, you said that you never wanted to do anything to do with the yachting industry ever again.
Yeah, I did say that.
You did say that?
Yeah.
So what changed?
Honestly, so I remember this phone call.
I was like, do you want to come for a free lunch? She was like, I don't want anything to do with the yachting industry ever again. I'm like, okay.
Yeah. You called me now, I was walking the dog, and you said, oh, this is what I'm doing. And I don't think I had at that point processed actually all of the things that had happened in my leaving the industry. And I was in the middle of this crisis of what am I doing with my life? And so to me, I think when you said, oh, come and, I'm going to host this lunch for people and, the transition from leaving yachting. And to me, it just filled me with fear of like, well, I'm not there yet. I'm not out the other side. And I think, I can't remember if you had said something like, oh, people would love to hear your story or something. And I was like, but I haven't got a story. Like I haven't got there yet. And so I think I just sort of clammed up, and my way of leaving the industry was like, I didn't want to see it because it was difficult leaving. And so I unfollowed people on social media.
Yep.
My husband stayed in yachting and I didn't want to hear about it. I didn't want to, go hang out with any yachty friends. And I'm not saying that was the right thing to do, but I think it was, I had to
like distance. A detox.
Yeah. I had to distance myself from it because otherwise I think it felt too painful at the time. And so when you first spoke to me, I wasn't ready.
I just wanted you to come for a nice lunch.
I just didn't want a lunch. I just wasn't ready yet.
Can we put this on the record? It's the first time she turned down free wine and free nice food.
Yeah, I know. And it was at one of my favourite hotels.
Yeah.
Still, I was like, I'm not doing it. But I think I just hadn't healed yet.
You needed time.
I needed time. And, now dare I say it, like I am involved in the yachting industry slightly. I have my toe dipped in at a safe level with Karina, the crew coach. And that feels right for me. I'm happy to do this. I'm happy to do work for the crew coach. My personal private practice isn't going to be yachting based. And kind of through choice, but I like having some involvement still, and obviously my husband's still in the industry in some way and lots of friends are, and so I'm always going to have some involvement, but I think it doesn't need to be...
I shall keep dragging you to lunch.
Doesn't need to be kind of all-consuming.
No. I mean, to be honest, I don't think when you step off it can be all-consuming because they don't want you anymore. And I think that's sort of one of the things that a lot of women struggle with is this industry that is all-consuming, and then when you step off, it's not really that bothered about you anymore. You're not being phone calls. You're
replaceable.
You're totally replaceable. And I think, for all of those ladies a bit like myself that are still trying to make their way in it, it's not easy. No. So I completely understand that. I don't agree with turning down lunch, but I completely understand what you were saying.
Yeah.
You did come around eventually.
I think you're taking me for lunch after this.
With using, so obviously, have you taken any skills from your time on board and adapted them apart from the non-tidy? Obviously, that failed. Non-tidy. Did you take anything?
Yeah. I think.
What does it give you, the yachting industry, to take on?
I think yachting gave me. It really honed my ability to read people, to preempt needs, to take care of other people's needs, and all of these things. I think I probably did too much, and that did lead to my kind of burnout. But they're really, really amazing skills to have. And so, whether it's looking to see if someone's glasses, needs filling up, or, when someone might need some space, or they need a conversation, or noticing perhaps when a crew member is starting to distance themselves from the crew, or, you might notice they're struggling with meal times, or all those kind of little warning signs. They're all things that I use in my everyday life with friends and family, but also my work with clients that come and see me. It's all about reading people and being aware of what's going on for them. And I think that is actually what yachting really, really taught me.
Is that being in tune with others?
Reading the room, being in tune with others, and actually experiencing different people from all different walks of life, from different cultures, from different countries, from completely different backgrounds and different life experiences, and finding that common ground with them. And that's an incredible gift that you don't get in many other workplaces. And that's amazing. And I wish everyone had more opportunity for that.
So in the next, like, obviously I would say you're a story of success. You've gone on to create your own practice now. You've not finished a master's yet.
Next year.
So still going. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Yeah, so I'm opening my private practice this summer. I don't know when this is going out, but this summer that's going to kick off. I'm just doing my website now, which is exciting. And 5 years, I hope I was going to say a successful practice, but I think it depends on how you define success. And I think success for me is that feeling of contentment and that feeling of kind of being at peace. I'm not kind of striving after huge finances, or I don't care if my name is, up on awards, or I'm not striving to be kind of the best at anything. I'm just striving for that kind of inner peace, I guess. I would like to have more children at some point, not right now, but definitely in the near future. Don't want to scare my husband if he's listening. And I want to be able to be flexible in all aspects of my life, and I want to be there for my friends and my family and have time. I want to be at the school gates for pickup. So to me, being successful is those things, and my work, enabling me to do those.
It's quite amazing that obviously you've gone from working on board and being completely burned out and using that as then the blueprint for the opposite.
Yes.
Putting your own health first, which then also puts the health of your family and friends in your life.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's boundaries. It's the thing that I struggled with the most. And, I said I'm still not very good at it. Okay, maybe in terms of discipline, if my child doesn't want to wear a coat, he doesn't wear a coat, fine, But in terms of my life and putting my health, my mental health and my physical health first, I am pretty boundaried. And it's taken a lot to get here to do that. But it's really, that's probably my life aim, because without health,
there's not much else. Just to go back quickly, obviously when you're working on board and you're a couple, what was it like to then you're at home and your partner? So you go from 24/7, in each other's pocket, to then a long distance relationship. And I think it'd be quite interesting for a lot of the couples on board right now. Because I imagine it's not all great all of the time.
No. As is, any relationship probably. There's got to be ups and downs. But, living and working together on board comes with its own challenges. And then suddenly you're apart. I think the key for anything is, with any relationship, doesn't matter whether it's romantic or your parents or friends, is there has to be time for connection, and whatever form of connection that may be. And so, if my partner was on board and I was at home, and if I was at home and had a lot of free time and he didn't, that's what I found difficult, because those moments of connection were few and far between. He was busy, he had guests on board, the Wi-Fi was crap, could barely have a proper FaceTime. And so it was trying to kind of figure out how you can connect in that. It was hard, and it was also hard because then we had a baby. And so that added a whole another aspect to it. But I think ultimately it comes down to choice. And if you want to be with them and you want to make it work, you can make it work. And you develop coping mechanisms to deal with it. And for me, I kind of slightly did close off emotionally, I think. And I kind of put a bit of a barrier up. And I had to do that, I think, because otherwise it was too difficult and I did miss him too much. So that kind of enabled me to survive and it be fine. And then when he came home, I had to learn to take those barriers down. And that, for me, was almost harder than putting them up and missing him.
I think with the kid, we could do a whole episode on children and how it changes you.
Yeah.
But I can completely resonate. Obviously you're talking about him being busy, but when you've got a kid, it'll be you that can't pick up the phone.
Yeah.
You can't find your phone.
Can't
hear, literally can't be bothered to talk to anybody because your brain feels like it's, imploding. I've never really thought of it like that. You'd go into complete survival, especially in the first 2 to 3 years with kids. You've got to just survive, especially the non-sleep section.
Yeah, we had one of those.
Apparently my husband had one of those and I wasn't there, so it's a shame. We all have our things, but we can. Yeah, poor Tim. So this is Tales from the Superyacht Laundry, and when you're talking, you're talking directly to those girls on board right now. What would be your advice to them right now? What are your little gems of wisdom to help them now and then when they get off?
Goodness. Okay. I think to help them now is prepare. I think, mind mapping what you want your life to look like, whether you call it manifesting, whether you call it mind mapping, planning, whatever it is, mood boards, what do you actually want your life to look like in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? And what are the steps that you need to take to get there? I think on a really practical level, figure out what that is. And when you're in yachting, it's so easy to lose yourself because you don't really have much time for yourself.
Yeah.
And if you asked me the things that I like to do or what hobbies I had, at the time I was sunbathing,
drinking rosé,
going in the sea, exploring, hiking, all of these things that I could do on board or where we had some time off. But actually I completely lost touch with anything else that I like to do as Emma. And so trying to reconnect, I think, with some of those parts of yourself that then you might have at home where you might not have those other opportunities, I think was important for me. And that helped my transition in kind of rediscovering who I was apart from the yachting version of Emma.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think that's okay to have different versions of yourself at different times and seasons of your life. So preparing for that. So figuring out what is it that you want and who am I? What do I like to do? And what do I need to get there? And kind of not losing sight of that when you make that transition. And these things can change. Who knows if in 10 years this is actually what I want to be doing? I don't know. But for now, it feels right. So I'm going to go with it. And so I think not being afraid to allow room for change, and also to allow room for time, because nothing happens quickly. I will have in total been training for actually 6 years since I left yachting before I get to where I want to be, with having a child in that as well. And that feels in some ways like a lifetime, but actually it's nothing in the grand scheme of things. I'm 30.
I think I can't remember. I was listening to a podcast the other day and they were talking about it's the journey. You know, you can have a destination you want to get to, but it's not worth anything if you're not enjoying the journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just not, you know, it's going to be a complete, well, not a complete waste of time, but, you know, if you take the time to actually enjoy where you're going and the experience, I would like to think the happier you are at the other end, kind of thing.
I always say, at what cost? So, like, you can do whatever you want, but at what cost? Like, to who? To your health, financial cost, like cost to, your mental well-being, or, you know, what cost?
Hopefully it doesn't cost too much. Well, a master's is quite expensive, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Those savings evaporate really quickly.
They are long gone.
So we are coming to the end now, and obviously with every guest I ask if you've got a wild, crazy story from your time on board.
I'm going to be boring, and I'm going to decline that for because the story I want to tell I've signed a non-disclosure for, so I can't tell you that one.
Can you tell me somebody else's?
But what I want to do is maybe tell you my two standout moments from yachting. Okay, one is slightly crazy, and it is when I flew my owner's dog from France to New York. I flew with him on the seat next to me to fly him home. That was one of my favourite moments. It was at the end of a really long season, and it was like a 10-hour flight of just me and the dog. It was amazing. I watched like 4 films and had the dog on my lap the entire time. It was amazing. But now when I look back, I just think, wow, that's kind of insane.
It was like on a private jet or something?
No, it wasn't. It was just a normal economy. It was an economy seat for the dog and me. But also, one of the things that you said to me when I worked for you was you took us out to dinner in Athens. Do you remember?
Yes, I do.
Do you know the story I'm going to say? And you bought us a little, was it a necklace or a bracelet?
Necklace.
It was a necklace, and I've got it somewhere still in my jewellery box. And it was a little black sheep. And you said, right, this is for Alex and I. And you said, look, whatever you do in life, don't follow the crowd. Don't be afraid to be the black sheep. Like, and you were like, I feel like I'm a bit of a black sheep, and I feel like you two both can be a black sheep. So, like, always be the black sheep. And it's something that's always stuck with me, you know? And I think you do, in the yachting industry, you have to not be afraid to step out of that norm if you want things to change, or you want to make a difference, or you want to make it work for you.
I think stepping onto the boat, you are a black sheep. A woman that chooses to go into the yachting industry, you're not normal, okay? Because if you've decided to pack a bag, go to a country you've never been, to work on a boat you've never seen, and also to work with people you've never met, there's obviously something wrong with you.
Perhaps not.
Or perhaps not. So, yes, well, I'm actually quite surprised you remember that. But, you know, for me, it's, you know, one of my things was just to embrace it. You know, you could, you know, when I'd gone back home and everybody's like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there is an advantage to being a black sheep.
Yeah.
Our stories are generally more exciting, especially when the non-disclosures don't kick in. But no, it is, you know, step into who you are.
Yeah.
Whatever that is. And don't be scared to try, fail, and try to be patient.
Yes.
That's one of the things I'm not good at.
Are you not?
No, I'm not good at patience, especially with myself.
Yeah.
But yeah, you get there in the end. You get there. Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. It's quite lovely to see how, you know, because obviously you are one of the individuals that I've seen from, you know, beginning to this chapter. And we'd love to do another podcast, and we'll maybe talk about in more detail, you know, mental challenges of the transition itself, motherhood, that pearl.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because like what you said about, you know, obviously becoming a mother and kind of living near your folks and obviously your old friends and everything else, a lot of women choose to go and be in port.
Yeah.
So the husband captain can be there.
Yeah.
So it'd be nice to get you back on for that if you'd be up for it.
Anytime.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Why Pals Tales from the Superyacht Laundry. If you have enjoyed listening to us, please join our community. We have an app. You can join us. We have lots of discussions going on about these topics, and we'd love you to join us.